Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar series. My name is Katie Desmond and I am the Director of Student Membership and Pre-PA Membership at AAPA. And it's really my pleasure to welcome you all this afternoon. Our speaker this afternoon is Andrew Baker, who has founded a company called PA for Finance. When I started talking to Andrew a few months ago about his services for pre-PAs and PA students, I really thought he had some great information to share. I get emails all the time from pre-PAs and from students and even early grads who are extremely concerned about their finances. One email I got last week told me that this individual and his fiance, who's also a PA student, have a combined $430,000 in student debts after graduation. And this particular individual seemed like he had a great plan in place, but I know it's a big concern for all of us in terms of how to manage our finances forward. So I'm really excited about this presentation and I appreciate you all joining us this afternoon. Andrew, would you like to take it away?
Yes, thank you very much. Are you able to see my photo on there?
Here, I'm going to ask to start your video. I just realized I'd turn you off. One more bit of housekeeping.
There we go.
This presentation is going to last about 45 minutes. And you can use the chat for a conversation with staff if you have a question for me or if you'd like to say hello. And please use the Q&A function for your questions. We'll answer the questions after the presentation is concluded. So, thank you, Andrew.
All right, well, thank you very much, Katie. I have been an AAPA member for more than 10 years now. And let me just start by saying that this organization has taken me really everywhere I've always wanted to go as a PA. I joined as a student. At that time, I unfortunately didn't utilize their pre-PA tools that they had offered, but I've been a member ever since I was a student. I can't tell you how many wonderful conferences, resources, tools, networking I've gotten from this great organization. So it's a real honor to be part of this today. So let's go ahead and get started. Real quickly, I just want to go over myself and kind of what got me here today. This kind of just goes through some of the degrees and other notable professional titles that I have held. I do work currently as a full-time PA. I've always worked full-time ever since I became a PA in May of 2012. I really take pride on that. Even though I'm starting something new, I want to continue to do what I'm truly passionate about, which is helping patients. And that's what's got me here today. It's very reasonable to have more than one passion in your life. Mine is medicine and finance, which is why we're speaking today. But let me just say, without dealing with patients over the last 10 years and learning from them and learning from the other many great PAs that I've worked with over the years, it is a truly great honor to call myself a physician assistant. And for all you, everybody on here who is a pre-PA in PA school or wherever you are in your PA journey, you are very fortunate to have this job. And I know this year has been a very hard year. I've lived through it as well. So keep your head up and keep pushing, okay? So I want to touch on kind of what got me into finance even after I became a PA. So I graduated in May of 2012. And at that time, I was about to have, my wife and I were about to have our first child. So I graduated from PA school and I found myself in a waiting period to get credentialed at a hospital. At that time, the credentialing process and the supervising physician process was much longer than, it was much longer than it is now. So I tried to find something to do and how I could teach myself more. Of course, I was looking into, I chose a job in reconstructive plastic surgery as my first job. So I was trying to familiarize myself as much as I could with some of the important topics of that specific job. But I also found a passion in finance. And the way I did that is during this waiting period, I met with a financial planner. And at that time, this individual had no idea what a PA was. he had no idea what the profession entailed or the education. And he asked me numerous times when I was going to become a doctor. And at that was a little bit more common 10 years ago than it is now. But, that just kind of tells me that he had no idea why I was there or what my income could be or anything. So we met, and it was a very eye-opening experience. I found that he shared some, after meeting a couple of times, he shared some information such as my net worth and my debt to income ratio, which at that time were numbers that I was not familiar with, and I really knew nothing about. So I found out that I was, had a very negative debt to income ratio and a very negative net worth. And I was sitting there, this is probably just a few weeks before my son was born, and I realized that I never considered this. The last 10 years of my career were all focused on, graduating as an undergrad, getting into, getting the healthcare experience, getting into PA school, passing my pants the first time, and getting a job right out of school. And I was able to do all those things, but what I did not do is plan how to get rid of my debt. And my only plan at that time was to pay it off slowly over 25 years, as I thought everybody else did. So at that time, I read a lot of books. I listened to podcasts. I met with my financial planner many times. And I wanted to better understand how to get out of debt and how to just understand finances in general. So I realized that it was more, what was kind of the light bulb going off was it was more than just myself. As I was in a relationship, I was about to have my first child, and I realized that the financial decisions I made today would possibly be able to change my family tree. And when I thought about that, I was still in my 20s at that time, I realized how significant that was, and it was really a motivating factor. And today, I will say I have a positive net worth. It's no longer young and the negative, and I am very happy that I was able to kind of go through some of those struggles early on in my career to get me where I am today. So that's a quick little history about what got me into this, and let's get started in the presentation. I'm not going to read all these objectives, but basically these are the things that we're going to hit on. I'm going to talk about each of them throughout this PowerPoint. And also at the end, I'm going to share, I'm going to go through some specific questions that we received prior to this webinar, and just go into a little more detail at that time. So what is finance? I personally never took any finance class in college. I wish I would have, or business. People used to tell me that, but I was so uber focused on becoming a PA. That's really all that I cared about. So we're going to talk about personal finance and not public finance or corporate finance. That's not really applicable to this discussion. So I want to go through a couple of financial terms. Some of these I spoke about earlier. One of them is net worth. Net worth is basically what you own and what you owe. So I'm going to give an example of this PA student in this model here that has, upon graduation, they have $10,000 in savings, and their total student loan debt is $150,000. So when you look at their net worth, you can see it's around negative $140,000, which is very common, and which is where I was. And I also want to go through the debt to income ratio. This is basically takes how much you owe monthly and how much you bring home monthly. And as you can see, those numbers for somebody who's making around $95,000 has that kind of student loan debt of $140,000, with all the living expenses as well. That turns out to be about $4,000 per month divided by the $8,000 per month, which is a debt to income ratio of 50%, and anything above 40 is not good. So if you're, around the 40 mark, that's a good thing. But if you're way above, then that's not as good of a thing. So I want to go into a little bit more about personal finance. So what is personal finance? Earnings and income, your living expenses, your budget, your financial goals, and your financial desires. All those things kind of go into your finances and how you plan for your future. The next thing is the time value of money. This is also something, if there's one of the few topics that I hope that sticks with you after this presentation, is this topic right now. Long-term investments are subject to something called compound interest, and that is significant growth of your money, independent of you putting in more money. So if you put in $1,000 a month at age 23, for until you're 65 versus $1,000 a month from age 50 to 65, there's millions of dollars of difference. And we'll get into that a little bit more later, but that is just one topic that I wanted to make sure that you at least heard. Now we'll talk about it later. Just one more slide about personal finance. These are some things that are included in it, such as the credit cards. Who doesn't have a credit card? Insurance, whether it's health insurance, disability insurance, life insurance, depending on where you are in this process. Your banks, your mortgages. Some of you may be renting, but I'm sure there's some people that still own, and all these things together are considered with your personal finance. So this is a subcategory of finance, and it's called behavioral finance. And this is really important, and this is actually one of the areas that really drives me as a PA, as a father, as a husband, because so many times there's reasons that we all believe in different phases of our life that we need to spend money. And spending money is good for the economy in general, but it's got to be within your means. So there's cognitive reasons why people do it. Everybody has a rationale for one. Why do people spend their money? And some of us, unfortunately, came from families that our parents didn't manage money well. And some people follow in their parents' footsteps, but others want to do something different for themselves. And another big rationale, and particularly for graduate students who have had a long-term investment in their education, who have potentially not been able to do some of the things that their friends have, that obtained a 4-year degree and are driving nice cars and going on vacations, that people feel that we deserve this. And that is a really big reason why a lot of people, especially new graduates, spend money that they don't have. Finding ways to deny a spending problem is hard, because we have convenience-induced denial. What's convenient to us? Well, I've been in school for a while. My car's 6 or 7 years old. I think I need a new car. I'm gonna be driving a little bit farther to work. That is a convenience to get that, but not necessary. And there are so many different things that people buy because it's just convenient in life, and that's normal to do that for most people. And last is our biases. They dictate our behavior. These can be learned from our childhood, learned from our surroundings, or come, when you graduate and you're having a job and you're working in hospitals with people, physicians, PAs, nurse practitioners that have been in practice for a while, you kind of see what they're doing, and it can be very typical to want to follow in your colleagues' footsteps. And I also want to talk about a few different kinds of wealth. We think of financial wealth when we think about wealth. How much money do we have? What kind of house do we have? What kind of car do we drive? But there's a few other ones I want to talk about. And really, when you think about yourself as an individual and your family, you want to have some of all these and not heavily in one and not in the other. Social wealth, what is your status? Again, everyone wants to keep up with the Joneses. They want to drive the nice car, have the people notice their clothing, post a nice vacation on Facebook. These are all things that all of us want to an extent, but some of us care much too much about. Time, how much freedom do you have? Are you locked into your job, working 78 hours a week, every week? Are you able to enjoy your free time, or are you worried about your job or your patients, or just have some sort of a worry? And lastly is physical health. Sometimes healthcare providers are some of the worst patients. I've been there. I've seen lots of my colleagues do that as well, and they don't take care of themselves. But remember, you have to take care of yourself if you want to succeed in this world. All right, here's some statistics. I want to just say that you are on a unique trajectory. You are in a profession and a professional program that's going to put you to be a very high income earner. And even though right now, with COVID, so there's lots of rumors going on how there's no jobs. There's so many negative things going on in the world right now. Just stay the path. This has happened before, and you will get there. And just stay strong, because unfortunately some people will not be able to stay strong, and that's going to leave more opportunities for people to do. So a couple important statistics here. Here's just some of the salaries for family medicine, ER, and orthopedics are some of the most common ones. But keep in mind two things. This is based on a 32-hour work week. Basically, all the statistics about pay are, because some people, full-time is considered 32 hours a week or more with all these stats. But then you look at the average debt for PA school, and that's a combined undergrad and graduate, so it's around 150,000. All right. Here's some other stats about the profession I want to share with you as a motivating factor. A PA is the best third job, is the third best job overall across the board of any profession. Number two in healthcare, I believe a dentist is number one. This profession is expected to grow significantly. When I started formulating these slides in 2016, the amount of growth that we've had from 2016 to now is astronomical. And you all know how many PA programs are starting. Sometimes want to be the first, a lot of you are probably going to be the first cohort to go to some of these schools. And it is a really neat time to be in this field. And also, they're projecting a physician shortage. This was even before COVID hit. And a term that we used in one of my leadership jobs I used to have for a healthcare agency was staffing optimization. And that's basically saying, who can you have as a staff member that is the cheapest and can still get the job done? Well, if you think about how much more expensive a physician is to pay than a PA, well, guess what? Suddenly, if a facility had 5 doctors and 2 PAs, they're switching to now 2 doctors and 5 PAs. So that's opening up more opportunities for us. I put the median salary in there. Earlier had the average. There's just a slight difference. And here's the breakdown about the debt, roughly 36,000 undergrad and 112,000 for graduate school. I know that may be farther of an outlier from some of you, but that is kind of the national averages. All right, PA well-being. This is a really, really important process. And I want to, before I get into these next slides, just start by saying that some of these things can come off a little bit negative, and I don't mean it that way. I just want everyone to be informed about what can happen. And a lot of times we miss out on some of the important processes in life, and some of them are bad, and we're only focusing on and kind of ignoring them. So just being informed. Again, I can't say it enough, but this profession, I would never choose it over any other one if I had the choice, even at this point in time in my career. So it is a wonderful profession. Keep up the work. You're going to get the PA school, and you're going to have a great experience and land a great job. But well-being is basically just the physical, mental, and emotional health of PAs. And there's a couple of different ways to look at this. The satisfaction with one's life, what kind of emotions you're having. Are you having meaning in your life? And what is your psychological strength that you have? These are all so important together, and ignoring one of them can have big time repercussions. You got to have balance in your life. You can't work all the time. You can't play all the time. You have to find balance in your life. You have to reduce your debt stress. Living with large amounts of student loans, mortgages, car payments, credit cards, among second mortgages and home equity loans and all these things that people do. And when you look at a lot of these people, they seem happy, but boy, let me tell you, I've seen other colleagues of mine that are on that spectrum, and when you truly find out what's going on with them, they're not quite as happy as you once may have thought. Time management is extremely important, and this comes when you're a student, whether you're in undergrad still or in PA school. Time management is key. You have to take care of yourself. You can't spend 8-10 hours a day studying. It just doesn't work long term. You got to give breaks for yourself. So at this point, I want to talk more specifically about financial debt stress. You have to find ways to be resilient. This is going to happen all the time when you be a PA. You have to quickly recover from a difficult situation. Let me give you an example. You work in the ER. There was just a very traumatic event that happened to a patient. You had to see their family, their friends, all mourn over their death or their significant injury. And then you quickly have to change directions and go talk to somebody else who, whose newborn child comes in with a cough. Being resilient as a student and recovering quickly from a bad grade or a difficult teacher or an encounter with one of your classmates that resulted negatively. These are finding ways to kind of bounce back and be resilient through this. It starts now because you're going to need this later in your career. I mentioned financial debt stress, we'll get into a little bit more here, but also having healthy boundaries, you know, with your friends, your family, your program instructors, and eventually your employers. If you're not upfront with your relationship with them about what's going to work and what's not going to work, it's going to be very difficult to keep a long-standing, sustaining relationship. So financial debt stress, some of you probably know some of the negative effects of stress from some of your undergrad classes or PA school classes, but let me just say it has many negative effects. It triggers the body's fight or flight response. You know, when the body finds ways to adapt to these conditions and increases cortisol and adrenaline, and it causes numerous problems such as high blood pressure, elevated heart rate, memory, mood problems, and also immune function. And that's key right now, especially in a pandemic. I'm sure a lot of us have had COVID. Some of us are, you know, most certainly going to get it, and a lot of us are scared to get it. So having a healthy lifestyle free from as much stress as you can have is really important. I wanted to share this slide because we're going to talk a little bit about burnout. We don't get burned out because of what we do. We get burned out because we forgot why we do it. I know I've said this many times, but if you're going to work because you have debt to pay, you know, you got another expensive vacation, you bought a house you shouldn't have bought because it's too expensive. Meanwhile, you have these student loans that you're paying the minimum payment on, and they're just growing faster than you can keep up with. You didn't choose to become a PA for that reason. Most of us chose to become a PA because we're passionate about patient care. We have faith in the profession, and we want to serve patients over time. So never forget that, especially during times of stress, particularly right now. So PA burnout. This is really, really important. It is more than just having a bad day. It's more than just, you know, fretting about, you know, your $200 car payment that you just had. This is emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. It's cynicism towards your patients, being angry that they're coming to see you, and being detached from why they're there. When you see patients, or when you're dealing with your classmates or your program directors and your professors, you have to engage in a mutual relationship with them that's going to benefit you both. You know, if you're not putting in the work and you don't care what happens now in school, it's not going to get any easier. And I remember very well, even though it's been close to 10 years ago, how I thought how difficult PA school was. And let me tell you, it's difficult, but taking care of a patient on your own who has real life problems that you can relate to, that's something you just can't detach from. And it happens when you get burned out. You lose interest and motivation in what you're doing. Suddenly, you don't care that somebody has a family emergency and they need to take the day off and they're asking you to work. You have no motivation to take that shift. You have no motivation to go to work, even though, you know, when you decided to become a PA, you were extremely motivated. And let me just say, I am still extremely motivated. I love learning. I love taking care of patients, and it is truly the best profession I could have asked for. And last on this slide is decreased personal accomplishment. If you do something good, if you find a diagnosis for a patient that saves their life or really puts them on a positive path, suddenly it doesn't matter to you anymore. It doesn't matter if you're seeing a high amount of patient volume during the day and taking good care of patients, because when you're burned out, you just remove yourself from everything besides showing up to work and leaving when it's over. Just imagine you put yourself in the situation. You go to the ER or go to your family doctor with a serious concern of some sort, and the healthcare provider that sees you keeps interrupting you. They tell you to hurry up because they're busy. They seem very judgmental or critical of your legitimate problem that you're bringing to them. It seems like they're just going through the motions. I'm sure most of us have been on the patient side of it with ourselves or our family members when we've seen someone like that. And never be that person. We all have bad days. We all have, emergencies that happen in our life. But for the vast majority of our career, you don't want to be that person because it can be really hard on the patient. And burnout is not something that happens from joining a job a few months ago. It's a cumulative effect of being overwhelmed, unable to meet constant demands of your job, of your debt that you have. Study burnout. It starts now. You have to prioritize your time. You have to find ways to be productive and find ways to enjoy your life, even if it's at the midst of a busy time. So just as in summary with this, you need to prepare as a student to prevent burnout later. And one more slide about burnout. These are some striking numbers that I've came across over the years about how many people in America don't have any excess funds. So when I say 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, that means if they have a $1,000 expense that comes up, they do not have enough to pay for it unless they would use a credit card. There was a study in 2018 that was through AAPA that talked about burnout, and at this point it says 15% of PAs said they're happy at work. There's been some questions about how accurate that is, but it depends on the time. If you ask PAs now, how many of them are happy at their job with the pandemic and everything, it would probably be pretty low. But let me just say the vast majority of PAs that I work with are all very happy with their job and their career. And I talked a little bit about some of the income, the scenarios for these professions. ER is a high burnout because it's tough hours. I worked ER for 5 years. It was an amazing experience, but it can be tough to work those shifts and as well as deal with some of the patient complaints. Primary care is getting a little bit more demanding as well, and surgery. Surgery does long hours. Everybody wants to leave at 4 o'clock, but in a lot of these specialties that doesn't happen. So the burnout is higher. And a little bit more little bit more discussion about stress from debt. 85% of students say that their debt is their student loans are the major source of their debt. 1 of 3 say it's the biggest in their whole life, and 9 of 10 people struggle to make payments. And that is very true because they put these off, and before they know it, the interest has accrued and the loan number has substantially increased. Personal relationships and money fights are the second leading cause of divorce. And 64% of these adults feel very stressed about student loan debt more than any other source. So as you are navigating through school and in personal relationships, talking about money up front is important, and having a plan individually and then together with your partner or your spouse is something that needs to happen really early on in your relationship. Now I want to talk about the opportunity cost about being a PA. So an opportunity cost is basically the benefit that somebody missed out on when choosing one alternative over the other. Basically any sort of missed opportunity that you could have had while going to PA school and how this cost affects your future. So we'll give a quick example, 2 examples. One of which is somebody who chose a career as we'll say their first career. They went to undergrad and became, just say an accountant. And they decided they didn't want to do that anymore, but they have student loan debt and they've had a lot of costs associated with getting that degree. And some people have a hard time moving on from that degree, even though they have, it's not bringing them enough personal satisfaction. It's not what they want to do. And the other thing is, just for example, just say before PA school, you had a job making $20 an hour, working 40 hours a week. So over the span of going to PA school, making $20 an hour, 40 hours a week for 2.5 years is $104,000. And we just talked about earlier, the average student loan debt is $150,000. So if you add those 2 together, that is roughly $254,000 as the opportunity cost that you've lost out on from not having a job, and that the more debt that you've accrued with going to PA school. But if you look at it, the average PA salary we just talked about is about $115,000. So in 2.5 years, you've recouped that cost. And now you're kind of like even. And so in the years to come, you're going to be able to recoup that cost and more. So it is much worth the investment, even though you have to kind of give up a lot to do it. I know that can kind of come off sometimes the wrong way, but it's just important to understand when you choose one alternative over another in your life, what that means for yourself. And sunken cost is something else. This kind of goes back to the accountant that I spoke of. They had to pay the student loans to go to accounting school. Some people feel like they've kind of lost that money, that cost has been sunken down and they'll never utilize it. And it prevents them from choosing a new alternative over their life. And I will tell you that PA school is an investment on your future. You will not regret doing this down the road. So don't let anybody tell you anything different. All right. Paying for college. This is, I'm sure, a topic that we're going to talk mainly about on the rest of this webinar about, because most of you are doing that right now. And there is so many things that come into play with this, and it is more than just getting a loan and going to school and then figuring out when you graduate. Choosing your PA program carefully. So when you choose a PA program, there are so many things you need to look at. You need to look at how much it's going to cost. You need to look at how long it is. You need to look at what is their first time PANCE, which is the boards. What is the first time board pass rate? And do they also have any information about job placement for new graduates? These are all really important things. Some of them financially, some are just to set yourself up for success. There's a lot of PA schools that have had struggles as far as getting people to pass their PANCE and finding them jobs. So please look at that when you choose your school. Definitely utilize financial aid, scholarships. Those are things we'll talk a little bit more about here shortly, but those are things that I would start looking into now. Even if you are more than a year out from PA school, you can start looking into these things now and start applying for scholarships now. Working while you still can. Before you go to PA school, before you have to really start this rigorous program, work as much as you can now. I'm going to talk a little bit more later about working during PA school. There's a lot of debate about whether that should happen or not. You could probably convince me either way, depending on what your actual plan entails. Also with your loans, only borrow what is needed. Some people take out as much as they can, and that money, let's just say most of that money is not used for what the loan was for. And it gives people an excuse to not live like a student and do things that you should not be doing as a student. And let me just say, your future you will not appreciate you spending that money on a trip to the beach or a ski trip or whatever it is that you choose to spend that extra money on. And when you're applying for these loans, know what your payment expectations are. Sometimes there's varying options that you can use, and we'll talk more about income-based repayment here in a bit. And the next thing is know your salary expectations. You know, when you are going to a school that is the cheapest school or a school that is the most expensive option that you had, you need to know how much money you're going to be making in a few years, a rough estimate, because that might change your decision about what school that you attend. And more about these loans. There's a few different kinds of loans, but you want to exhaust the federal loans first as much as you can, and then the direct plus loans. Those typically have lower interest rates than the private loans do. Now, some people are forced to use private loans, and that's okay. If you're the only one that's helping fund your program, you don't really have a choice. But there's a lot of things that you might have to give up in order to do that. And I just put on the student aid website that I'm sure you've all visited that. If you haven't, make sure you check it out. It's a quick Google search, and you need to know this website really well. And also formulating a repayment plan. I know it sounds simple that you say, okay, well, I got to get these loans. I'll worry about it later. Please worry about it now. So I'm talking about worrying about now, excuse me, because you need to get a plan. You need to have goals. You need to create a list of actions and a timeline, whether you're a pre-PA to get into PA school or you're in school, or you're just getting out of school. There are so many things you need to do. As a pre-PA, there's CASPA, there's interviews, there's getting your loans. You have to get all these things down. When you're in school, you have to worry about passing your end of rotation exams. You have to worry about studying for the PANCE. You have to start thinking about getting a job way before you graduate. And also, you have to designate your resources, your time, your money, everything comes into making a plan, not just the money. So I talk about a vision. A lot of people lack a vision for what they see their future, and that's okay. I've been there, but really try to put yourself into the future you. What do you think you'll be doing in 5 years? I'm sure many of you were asked that question during your PA school interviews. Where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? That's important to think about for all of us, including me. Life is changing, and so many times it's unpredictable, particularly this year. I mean, nobody would have ever thought this was going to happen. But at the end of the day, you kind of have to have something a plan that you would foresee for yourself. And it is so motivating as well when you have a plan for yourself about how you can see yourself in the future. And it gives you direction. It gives you a compelling rationale for doing the things you're doing and making the financial decisions you're making now. And remember, it's okay to ask for help. When you start PA school the first day, you're going to have a lot of questions. But when you end that end that program, you're going to have so much more knowledge. And it takes time, but it's okay to ask for help. So make sure you ask for help. And taking control of what you're doing in your life. This is a kind of a little bit of a reiteration of what we said, but you have to create a vision for long-term success and reduce the amount of financial stress that you have. This is at a point in your life where you're going to see you and a lot of your colleagues go in different ways. Some people are going to continue to live this lifestyle that they can't pay for, and they're going to regret one day. So please don't be that person. Be the other person that you can help others achieve your goals and live a life that you don't have to worry about debt every day, or when is your next paycheck going to be, or how can I work more? Some people love to work. That's great, but don't work because you have to. Before I talk about budgeting, I want to go over a few more things. Please don't choose the most expensive PA school. There are a lot of things that are important for when your future employers are looking at you for a job. Let me just say, your education, your clinical skills, your work ethic, your resume, and also your references. When you apply to a position, say you wanted to go into surgery, for example, and you are able to get a reference from the chief of surgery at a hospital you're applying to, that means much more than which school you went to. Trust me, I've seen it happen many times. That's not to say if you have two candidates that are neck and neck, if somebody went to a more reputable university, that you might not get that. But let me just say that happens much less than what I was describing earlier. Okay, so if some of you are not on a budget, please try it. It is something that takes work. You don't start on day one, you don't start your budget and understand how to do it. And it's full of challenges because life is full of unexpected events and cost. So you have to find a way to navigate through that. And it starts with just picking an income with your, if you have income or your spouse has income, you of course want to put that on one end, but a lot of you are just going to have student loans. So you want to pick your fixed expenses. These are the things that are going to reoccur every single month at the same price. I gave you a few examples here: rent, your cell phone, health insurance, cable, for example. And other ones are more variable. Food, sometimes you're going to eat out more than others. Gas, you're going to drive more than other times. If you have a pet and you have a vet bill, there's just things that are going to vary, but you have to plan for them. And saving at this point in time, for all of you that are in school, at pre-PA or NPA school, I really don't advise having a large emergency fund at this point in time for a variety of reasons we'll talk about here in a bit. All right, so we're going to give you a few examples about a budget. So there's a 50-30-20 rule. It kind of goes through 50% of take-home pay or your loans is for necessities that you have to have. 30% are for discretionary items. We kind of talked a little bit about that. Eating out is a big one that people have. And then the last one is how much you want to save or pay down your debt. And so 80-20 is basically 20% going down to savings. The rest is going to other things. But you want to strive, particularly as a new graduate, the 60-40, which is 60% you're living on and 40% you're paying your loans off. That is a very generic way of looking at this, but for people that's never looked at a budget before, that's a good place to start. And with starting a budget, I mentioned this earlier, you want to give yourself time. Please, in 1 month, if it doesn't go like you want, that's okay. You know, life is full of unforeseen expenses, and it's going to happen. But just finding a way to start listing and knowing what to expect the next month is step one. And I put these examples down there. You know, a lot of people start going to the gym. You know, they go there 7 days a week the first week, and then it doesn't work out anymore. You know, starting a new graduate program such as PA school, what you think is going to happen the first week and what actually happens are two separate things, and that's okay. That's okay. All right, now I want to talk about the right way to use your student loans. You need to first determine how much you need to borrow for tuition. So that kind of goes back to when you find your school, the questions you need to ask are how much is tuition, and then you need to apply for these loans on the federal loans to see if you can get them. I believe the max direct unsubsidized loans is $20,500 per year. You can get additional loans through the Direct Plus loan, and then some of them have to be private. But step one is knowing what your expenses are for school, and then know if you have any income or your partner or spouse has any income. Do you have any scholarships you can apply to that? Do you have any other job or family help? And then you need to look at, so after you look at what you need, you look at how much you can actually borrow, which is kind of looking through those different federal loans that I just discussed. And then find out, is there a difference? You want to make sure you have at least, you know, obviously how much you need to borrow, but then you want to avoid taking out extra. And the reason is look at these numbers on the screen. If you take out extra that you don't utilize, one of two things are going to happen. You're going to spend it when you shouldn't be, or you're going to put it in a savings account that gets, you know, 0.01% interest rate, but you're going to be paying at least 6, upper 5, low 6, and for private loans, much more than that as an interest rate. So keep that in mind. All right. And one last thought about these loans, again, about getting extra. A lot of you have probably got your loan refund in the past, where you apply for the financial loans and FAFSA and all those things, and then somehow the number was not right, and they'll send you a check for X amount of money. This money is not to be spent for a vacation or a large non-essential purchase. If that requires, you know, I've had a long semester. The finals have been tough. I want to go out to eat with my friends. You can do that, but please be wise with this money. And one of the last things, I want you to avoid debt guilt. PA school is a great investment. You will be able to pay back the debt. It just comes with working hard and properly managing your money. You got to avoid listening to the 0.1% they can get through PA school without debt. If they can do that, that is a wonderful situation. I hope that they learn how to manage money if they don't have debt with going to PA school, because sometimes debt really forces you to understand how to manage your money. And again, you're on a unique trajectory. Stick with it. You have to start your career with a plan. And remember, it's okay to ask for help. This kind of goes into implementing it. We've met the enemy. It is us. If you have a spending problem, you're not alone. There's ways to fix it. Ask for help. Convenience-induced denial. I know things are convenient and easy in life, but really you need to think twice before you make a purchase, particularly a large purchase. Take control of your money and your loans. So that concludes most of the presentation, but I have a few other things I want to talk about briefly before we open it up for questions. One of them is about picking a specialty that you can reasonably expect to get a job in upon graduation. I will tell you, I work in dermatology currently, and I love it, but it is difficult to get a job in dermatology as a new graduate. So if you're holding out for your dream job as a new graduate, that is a very difficult thing to do. Not to say it's impossible, but you want to pick a specialty that you have a really reasonable chance of getting a job, getting the training that you need, the education you need as a PA, and it's also going to pay you well. But just don't hold out for this job that you don't have a good chance of getting. List your top 3 PA schools, look at them all very closely. And as a general rule of thumb, don't pick the most expensive one. A $250,000 PA program versus a $100,000 PA program. And that this is well within the realm of possibilities. That's a large amount of debt for the same degree and the same likely jobs that you'll land post-graduation. And also living in an inexpensive location as a new graduate. I live in Ohio. If I were to, as a new graduate, say I've always wanted to move to California and move to Los Angeles and suddenly have a lot of student loans, very high living expenses, it's just not a good idea to do this outside of school. Take the time to learn the role of being a PA, find out how to pay your loans off, make money, and then after a few years, be in a much better spot to move wherever you would like. Live with roommates if you can. Utilize public transportation. Ride a bike. I know that most people don't, but you can do that easily, especially if you have an excessive amount of student loans you're dealing with. Avoid going out to eat a lot. Who doesn't like to go out to eat a lot? I do, but if you do it all the time, that will add up so quickly. So keep that in mind. And you will not be an expert on your own finances when you begin this journey. No one is. It takes time. Commit to your future self, because you will definitely thank yourself later. Quick thing about a few scholarships. I had some questions on that. There are a number of them. I'm going to kind of summarize some of these. AAPA has several. There's the AAPA Past President Scholarship, the AAPA Rural Health Caucus Scholarship. There's an NCCPA, which is a credentialing body for our licensure, has an endowment scholarship. The PA Foundation has scholarships. But look at your states, your state associations. When I was a student, I got it 2 years in a row. The first year, I was the only one in the entire state that applied for the scholarship. The only one. Next year, I think I was one of like 10 that got it. So there's scholarships out there that are not utilized. Check them. And then also with your universities, I got some through the university that I went to, and they're out there, and a lot of people just don't look. So just keep that in mind. Be committed to your future. If you are, commitment does not have an exit plan. Make a plan and stick with it, and you will thank yourself later. All right, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, that was super helpful, Andrew. And we have some great questions queued up. Pay benefits wise, what should we look for in a job offer, such as base pay, 401k match, health insurance, etc.? And this person is in North Carolina.
Okay, so when you look at your all-inclusive package, you have to weight all of them differently, and it depends on where you are in your life. My first job that I chose was in an academic university that did not pay the highest, but it had really great benefits. But the other thing that you need to consider when picking this, especially as a new graduate, we all want to make the most money when we're a new graduate, because we have all these student loans, and let's be honest, we've worked for it, right? So you want to make as much as you can. But if somebody, give an example, has a little bit of a lower of a salary, but they'll pay all of your benefits without cost, that's huge. For example, your health insurance. I work with, let's pick and say, you have a job that's making $100,000, but you have a $700 a month payment on your health insurance versus a job that makes $90,000 and they pay all your health insurance. That's less money you have to pay at the end of the day. But as a general rule of thumb, and this is a hard question to answer in just a quick conversation, but you have to weight them all on how much you get paid, your 401k. Your 401k match, obviously that's important, but as a new graduate, you probably won't be maxing out your 401k anyways, because you're going to have a lot of student loan debt. And that's as a general rule of thumb, that you don't want to put $19,500 a year and to maximize your 401k and then pay the minimum payments on your student loans that the interest is building up quickly on. So as a general rule of thumb, you got to weight them all equally. But just please consider them all when you look at it, and not just consider the salary.
And the next question you did touch on, but I think it's worth going over one more time. Can you explain net worth?
Yes. So it's how much money do you have and how much money do you owe? So when you graduate from, when we all graduate from PA school, most of us have a significant amount of debt, whether it was undergrad or PA school or a car or a credit card. So you add them all up. And then how much money do you have to your name now? For example, how much money do you have in your bank accounts or any investment portfolios that you've had from a previous job or something that you did prior to going to PA school? But most of us have a negative net worth, which means we owe way more than we own.
Great. Next one, I'm in my mid-30s and have about 35K in student loans and very little invested in retirement. Do you recommend paying off debt first aggressively or investing aggressively for a retirement, especially considering I'll be in school for the next 4 to 5 years pursuing PA? And there were a few questions about when to start investing and versus paying back debt, or even ahead of, should they take out loans or start an investment account?
As a general financial rule of thumb, you do not want to take out more loans. We talked about behavioral finance, and if you suddenly are just ignoring those student loans and purchasing other things or investing, there's something that's called the rule of 72. And that means for a loan that has a 7.2% interest rate, it doubles every 10 years. So if you're paying the minimum amount on your student loans, those loans are roughly doubling every 10 years. So if you're putting it off for 10 years, just know that you're going to have a lot more debt to pay off. So as a general rule of thumb, even if it's delaying your investing by 2 to 3 years, you definitely want to pay off your loans first. And for the specific question I had about being in your mid-30s with that loan, my question, first of all, would be number one, do you have any income now? Or are you living on loans now? Because if you have income now, I would definitely advise paying some of it off now. So that's less of a burden. Even though it's going to be deferred when you're in PA school, the loan will be deferred. The interest rate is still accumulating. So the more you can get that down now, the less money that's going to cause you down the road. And if you're in school for the next 4 to 5 years, investing aggressively at age 40 versus very modestly at age 35, the answer every time is way too aggressively when you're done with your loans.
And this is kind of a follow-up to the earlier question about investing, but on one hand, if this individual has $10,000 in savings, is it better to pay for tuition or keep it and borrow additional for tuition? And then two, if they are getting a financial aid package that includes an extra $9,000 in loans, but they don't need that money because they just stay with their parents, is there something they could do with that $9,000, or should they just not take that extra money that they know that they don't really need?
Okay. The second part, I would say don't take the money because it's going to be tempting to spend, number one. And two, that money is going to be sitting there and you're getting charged interest on $9,000 a year for 2.5 years. So that's going to be several $1,000s more you have to pay back for money that you're not even using. And if you're living with your parents and you don't have a lot of living expenses right now, you could probably get by easily without that. And then the other question about the $10,000, you want to take out as little as you can because if the same rule applies, it's tempting. You know, we've all had a tough semester, or, you know, COVID's been going on, things are going to open up soon and people are going to want to go and do things. And you got to enjoy your life. You got to have balance, but just don't use your student loans now because you're going to have to pay for it down the road.
There are a couple of questions about how to factor in childcare when you're determining how much to take out in loans. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, you know, congratulations for you for going to PA school as a parent. I think my best friend in my PA class did that, and he did phenomenal as a student and as a great parent. So it takes a special person. So congratulations for you. I think I just really give everyone so much credit for doing that. But you have to. It's not fair for your children. I don't know how old they are, but to sit there and watch you study in your room by yourself and not give them the time and the attention they need, or have to skip out early in a class to go care for them. My question would be, if you're a single parent, that makes it much more difficult than not, because you'd be forced to using family, friends, or paying for childcare to do that. But if your spouse works, this is a time where you really have to work together to help offset some of your loans and help take care of your kids. I'll give you an example of somebody I know that it was a female who was in PA school, and their husband was working, but he was going golfing almost every night. That doesn't work. You can't be going golfing and then paying for childcare while your spouse is in school. So I hope that answers your question. It's kind of difficult because I don't know exactly where you're coming from, but if you have kids, somebody's got to watch them, and I fully understand that there's not much you can do about it.
I think the student's on the right track with their thinking, but maybe needs a pep talk. And I think it's a good example of what you were talking about in your presentation. I'm on a tight budget and go to a private school. Coming from a single parent household, I learned from an early age money doesn't grow on trees. At the same time, I refuse to buy a new computer, and everyone keeps telling me I need to. How do I overcome the pressure to fit while not isolating myself? I qualified for the maximum amount of loans, but only took out what I needed to cover my tuition, and I'm using my savings for expenses.
Well, congratulations to you. You are way beyond most of your peers, and not to downplay anyone else in this journey, but that thought process and that track that you're on is going to pay off later. So keep it up. This is not easy though. Everyone wants to, I should say, let me rephrase that. It's hard to not be on the same standard as your peers, but separating yourself is not a bad thing. There's going to come a time where you're going to thank yourself for doing this, and not be one of the people that have to add on, have to collectively refinance everything, and they're going to refinance a $5,000 computer on there, or a $3,000 new Mac that they had. If it works and it can get you through, then do it. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. Some of these things are a little bit abrasive sometimes, and I don't mean to come off that way, but most of the people in this world are broke. They live on loans. They don't own anything, and they're very stressed. And I can tell from just that question and the fact that you're on this webinar that you are not one of those people, and you are set up for success. So just hold tight, buckle down, get your education done, and you'll thank yourself here very soon.
The next question, do you have any insight about whether or not one should take out any amount of savings from a Roth RIA to pay tuition? My precursory calculations seem to show it'd be better not to, but was wondering what your thoughts were.
There is a penalty for removing that. So any invested money that you remove before the age of 65, there is a penalty for. And I don't know how much you have in there, but what I will tell you is that money is going to continue to grow over time. So for example, taking out that money now, I'll just pick a number and say it's $10,000 when you're age 25 or say 30, for example. That $10,000 with compound interest over the next 30 years is going to be about $75,000. So even though it's tempting to take that out to do it, if you're managing your money properly and you're minimizing your loans that you have, you'll be able to pay that $10,000 off much faster than you would anticipate without paying the penalty, and you'll thank yourself down the road that you did not.
So we're getting close to the hour, but there's a couple of questions here that I think will kind of cue us up to transition out. Does AAPA offer financial counseling for PA students, and specifically first years who haven't started yet? So we do not have a specific AAPA program with that, but I'm really pleased to announce, and I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to talk a little bit more about his services. But we have entered into a collaboration with PA for Finance for his services, and he will be offering AAPA members a 25% discount off of PA for Finance services. So Andrew, would you like to share a little bit more about your company?
Yes. Let me first say, I'm happy to answer questions by email. I remember being in your situation very well. If you have specific questions, I'm happy to try to work through these with you. So please don't hesitate to contact me. I have the website listed here, and then also this is my personal email. So please email with me with any questions. And then, as Katie was mentioning, there is a discount for AAPA members. I'm going to be offering a 25% discount for all services. If you do visit the website, there's a section that says book online. You can look at that. Depending on where you are or what your specific needs are, you can look at the different options for you. If you enter this code there, you'll get a 25% off of anything that you would sign up for. So this topic that we discussed today is so broad and so fast, it's honestly hard to cover everything. But the fact that you are all on this talk tells me you're on the right track. So that is wonderful. But for some of us, there is a lot more details need to go over, unique situations. And that's what I work with all the PA clients I work with PA for Finance. We go through all their individual circumstances, all the details of their income and their loans and their life situations. And I work through personally with every single person to formulate a strategic plan for you to set you up for success wherever you are on your journey. So please, again, you can contact me by email for specific questions, but for anything else in more detail, please check out our website and take a look at the options that we have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrew. This has been incredibly
Katie.
helpful. And thank you all for joining us today. We will have this recording up on our website within about 3 days. I also wanted to let you know that in January, on January 29th, we'll be having another webinar. And this webinar is part of our PA Like a Pro series, which is more targeted to students and early career PAs, but I also think pre-PAs may get a lot out of this webinar. It's going to feature the U.S. Public Health Service Corps and let you know about some opportunities available for those. Some of these opportunities you need to apply for early in your didactic year so that it'll actually help pay for your PA studies. So we'll have some members of the Service Corps on with us for that webinar to answer your questions and tell you a little more about that program. That'll be on January 29th, and we should have registration up for that in the next couple of weeks. So thank you all and happy holidays.
Thank you all. Have a good day. Thanks.